So first of all, thank you again to Chazaq for inviting me. The Chazaq organization is a historic organization. What they're doing for the Jewish people must be emulated around the country. We're still waiting. A few quick announcements. First off, usually I say we're sponsored by Shabbat.com, but we have sort of a little twist in that for those of you that follow the work that we do. We have created a new organization. Shabbat.com is under that organization together with 9 other organizations, and it's called Odiavo. Like Odiavo Shalom Aleinu. So it's odiavo.org, and Odiavo tackles issues like intelligent design. So Hashem.com is under Odiavo, and Havdalah.com, Ummah Alert, Why Marry Jewish, and Shabbat.com. They're all under Odiavo. So if you want to see the work that we're doing, go to Odiavo, exactly the way it's spelled, just the way it sounds, O-D-Y-A-V-O, Odiavo.com. And of course, we all wait for Shalom. So Odiavo Shalom Aleinu, it definitely speaks to what we're trying to accomplish. Number 2, if you haven't downloaded the app yet, Shabbat.com has an app. It came out 2 months ago. We are making shidduchim literally at a record rate. I'm coming from a shidduch that we made. They got engaged this morning, and they called me up. They said, could you do the vart? I said, I'm speaking in Queens, but I'll do the vart, then I'll leave in the middle of the vart. So right now at my house, there's a chatan v'kala that met through the site, and right now they are getting their engagement parties at my house. There was another one on Thursday. We had 6 last month, and it looks like we're headed for 6 this month. 6 shidduchim a month. Baruch Hashem, tremendous bracha, and it happens because we're doing it. We don't make any money. We're just doing it for the mitzvah. And I think when you do things for the mitzvah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps you just the way Chazaq does it. We try to do it for the mitzvah. So if you haven't downloaded it, go to your app store if you have a smartphone and download it. It's really easy and it's fun. It's a beautiful thing. One last thing, and then we're ready to begin. And I don't know how many people are going to see this video before or after this occurs, but we're trying something brand new. We're making a telethon. And the telethon means a live streaming program that will take place next Sunday from 12 noon until 10 at night. So it's 10 hours of entertainment for the whole family. We have singers, we have speakers, Rabbi Yosef Mizrachi, Rabbi Benzion Klatzko, Rabbi Leib Lam, a.k.a. Pella, Lipa Schmelzer, all sorts of singers and interesting people. And all of this is going to be hosted by myself and my sister, who's very well known. Her name is Rivka Malka, rivkamalka.com. So Rivka Malka, who's a very famous person in her own right, she is going to be hosting. So you can go, and it's free entertainment for your family. And the way that you find it is you go to something called livejudaism.com. It's one of the Odiavo sites, livejudaism.com, and you just put it on, and all day long we can entertain your family with Torah, with singing, with contests and prizes. It's going to be a lot of fun. Okay? There we go. It's Hanukkah. Yeah. It's the first night of Hanukkah. Now, Hanukkah is a very...
Hanukkah, man, you the man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a very special time, not just for all the Jewish people, but for our family personally, because a number of years ago, my wife went into labor right after we lit the very first candle, and she says she thinks we're going to have a baby the first night of Hanukkah, and Baruch Hashem, we did went to the hospital right afterwards, and we had our second son, who Baruch Hashem is married and is expecting his second child now. And that all happened, so life goes by very quickly, and we hope for bracha. That's the first night of Hanukkah.
Split second.
I wanna share with you an idea. I think it's a nice thought that you're going to be able to use all your lives. And together with this thought is a remarkable story it's very new. People don't know it. It literally just happened. I got a phone call, and when I heard the story, I couldn't believe it. I was shaking. I said, do you mind if I tell over the story? I think it's a miraculous story. And the person said, please tell it over. It would be a big zchut. But in order to tell it over, we have to mention an idea or a concept that is a life-changing concept. And the concept goes like this. When Hashem made the world, He created light in that world. One of the first creations, and even in science says right away after whatever happened, there was a bang, whatever it was, there was a tremendous amount of light. Light, it was the very first thing in the universe. Light, Vayomer Elokim yihi or, vayihi or. Vayar Elokim es or kitov. Hashem saw it was good, and that light was so good that Hashem says, I cannot have people use that light. That light is too strong, it's too powerful, it's almost scary. It's exciting, but it's not the kind of light that we could use. It is the kind of light that it says in the Gemara, in Nedarim, it says that this kind of light is the kind of light that tzaddikim nisrapim bam, rishoim nikshalim bam, nikashlim bam, tzaddikim, righteous people, they will be healed with that light. Wicked people will be destroyed with that light. That would be a horrible light to have, because anyone who does an Aveira, they could be destroyed with that light. So that kind of light is not the light that we, you and I, need. So Hashem took that light and He hid it in His treasury, in His treasure house, and that light will eventually be unveiled at the times of Mashiach. But instead Hashem replaced that with a second kind of light. And that's the light that we see with today. It's a very different kind of light. Now, I like science, so let's just speak about scientifically. How does that even work? So it's interesting to think about it. I can't tell you for sure that this is what it means, but we do know that the spectrum of light that we see with is very, 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 very small compared to the waves of light that literally exist, from the smallest waves, from microwaves to X-rays with radiation. There are many, many kinds of light, and it all depends on the distance between the crest of one wave and the next. Today, we only use a tiny portion of that spectrum to see. And we know that if that spectrum were increased, it would actually be dangerous. For example, if we looked at the sun, or if we were exposed to X-rays, it's a very powerful kind of light. So I threw that in case you want to understand how that works, different kinds of light. Well, we actually know scientifically there are different kinds of light. There's a small light which we see, and then there's the vast light which is much, much wider than the human eye can see. Hashem says that first light, we're going to put it away, and that second light, that's what you and I are going to use. So you're looking at me and I'm looking at you using second light. Now, that started a pattern in the world that applies to just about everything. And the pattern is known in Kabbalah as Or HaRishon and Or HaSheni. First light, second light. Everything works with two lights. And the more we understand the nature of the light, the more we will understand life itself. So let's understand the nature of this light, and then if we go deep enough, we'll see how this cuts to the heart of Hanukkah. Let's take this apart. Okay. First light is very bright. It's very exciting, but it doesn't last. It's bright, it's exciting, it's brilliant, almost scary, jittery, but it doesn't last. Disappears. Second light, not so bright, but it has staying power. Now, what's an example of first light, second light? So let me give you an example. Love. Love is a great example. The first light of love is when you first meet that person in your life. That's first light. Wow, I'm so in love, I'm so taken by them. It's brilliant, it's bright, it's beautiful. You think this is it? And yet, that first light does not last. It's brilliant and it's beautiful, but first light, which is first love, it doesn't last. It's going to disappear. No matter what the Hollywood tells us, first love, first light doesn't last. And by the way, it's a good thing that it doesn't last, because love, that first light of love, we could not stand living all of our lives in a relationship of first light. It would be way too much. First light, very bright. Let me give you another example of first light. I do an Israel trip. I take students to Israel. They study Torah. They go on tours. they enjoy Yerushalayim, and by the time the trip is over, every one of the students gets up and they speak and they say, Rabbi, from now on, I'm going to do Shabbat. From now on, I'm going to keep kosher. I'm going to do mitzvot. And I sit there and I nod. Wow, that's amazing, Melissa. That's fantastic, Sam. And I'm listening to them. Yeah, amazing. But in my mind, I'm saying, no, you're not. You're not doing this. You know why? Because all you just experienced was first light. First light does not last. And the reason that first light doesn't last is because it was the gift. Now we're just going to break it down. First light doesn't last because it was a gift. And because it was a gift, you didn't earn it. And because you didn't earn it, it's not going to last. Second light is different. First light was a gift. It's exciting. Let's take love, for example. When you love this person or you think you love them, and you want to go out with them on 10 dates, and you buy them flowers, you buy them chocolate, and you're giddy, and you write their name all over your notebook in little hearts, and you think that that's what love is. That's not love. You know why? Because you did nothing. What did you do? You just found them attractive? You enjoyed their personality? You felt good around them? That's not called earning it. You know what earning it is? Earning it is sitting by their bedside when they have a cold and their nose is running and they're coughing in your face and they're being demanding because they demand tea and chicken soup all day long, and there you are at their beck and call. That's love. Love is you're in a rush to go to shul and the person who you're married to says, honey, do you mind on your way out taking out the trash? What's that? I got a mitzvah. You're going to make me late taking. Yes. Right? Love is holding your tongue when your partner got their third parking ticket that week. That's love. Love is not bright and beautiful. That's first light. Love is mature and it's calming and it's lasting, but it's hard work. So first light, bright, beautiful, doesn't last because it was a gift. Second light, not so bright, not so emotional, not so stunning, but more calming, more mature, with much more staying power because you earned it. That's first light and second light. Let's give you the example of the Israel trip. This Israel trip that we do. Sometimes I'll have a student and they'll say, Rabbi, I'm going to keep kosher when I come home. And then they come home, and a week later I get a call, Rabbi, this is really hard. I mean, my parents don't want to change their dishes. There's no kosher restaurants near me, and if I'm hungry, what do I do? So if I tell them, well, you can go to a grocery store, buy tuna, you can buy some Del Monte beans, open up a can, put some almonds, mayonnaise, find kosher bread, make a sandwich. No, but I'm used to going to any restaurant that I please, any restaurant that I would like. Rabbi, it's not so easy. I want to keep kosher, but it's not so easy. I say, of course not. Because now you're trying to acquire second light. And second light, it's not a gift. Second light, you have to earn. So what if they keep Shabbos for a few weeks? You know what they'll do? They'll come to me and they'll say, Rabbi, I'm doing it, but it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel the way it did in Yerushalayim. And I'll say, of course not. Because second light doesn't feel like first light. But if you do it week after week, you'll feel it inside because you're earning it, you're deserving it, and it'll feel like it's part of you. It's not foreign. It'll have staying power. So let's again break it down. First light, big, beautiful, bright, doesn't last. I didn't earn it. Second light, not so bright, not so beautiful, but much more mature because I earned it. And it has staying power. Now, I want to mention something very quickly. Once we're speaking about love, I think this is an important point to mention. When we are married, one of the reasons that it's so difficult to get our second light is because we feel like we've already earned that person. That person already committed to us. We were underneath the chuppah together. We're committed, and therefore, I don't have to try anymore. I don't have to try. So I want to share with you just a real quick segue, but it's so important. It's on my mind, and I want to share it with you. As long as you're married, you have to be selling yourself to your spouse. You're always selling yourself. Don't ever once think that, oh, I don't have to sell myself anymore. They bought me. We're locked in. We live in the same house. Not true. Every day you are on display. You are on show. Every day you have to be selling yourself. And let me explain to you why this is true. When we have an encounter with somebody, and the encounter is a stressful encounter, the person, when they leave, may not remember what the stress was about. They may not remember the conversation, but what they will remember is, boy, I just left that person and I'm feeling stressed. People don't remember the conversation, they remember the impression of the conversation. And if you have a number of encounters that are stressful, or bitter, or angry, or complaining, then you're teaching your spouse that when we're in the same room, you could expect to feel stressed. You could expect to feel upset, or angry, or complained to. Now, I don't know too many people in this room or in the world who on their list of wishes, when they write down before they get married, the person I want to marry will be somebody who leaves me feeling stressed every time I leave them. That's what I want to feel stressed. I've never met such a person. Most people, if you were to ask them, they want to be around somebody who's fun to be with, who's happy to be with, who they feel at ease with. So what happens is, after we're married a certain amount of time, and we take the other person for granted, they say, look, if I can complain to anyone, it's them, because they're my spouse. Therefore, every time they come, I'm going to tell them, oh, the kids did this, the kids did that, and I'm just going to complain to them. Like they're my sounding board, my complaining board. And what you don't realize is, yeah, they can't help it. They're your spouse, and therefore they're stuck with your complaining. But every time they leave the room, they leave the encounter, and the encounter was one of complaining, you're teaching them that the relationship with you is a downer. That's the lesson. That's the lesson. And eventually, they're not going to want to be spending time with you, because who wants to be around a seviva of complaining? So I tell you this because second light, which is hard work, part of the avoda of second light, which is second love, is not just sitting by their bedside when they're sick, but is also selling yourself to them with every encounter. And it doesn't mean you can't occasionally be upset and share it with them. You had a bad day at work. I don't mean when you're upset at them, but upset at life and you're using them as your sounding board. Of course, they are there for that. But that's not their primary purpose. That's not what they're there for. You don't want to teach your spouse that encounters with you are downers. That's the work. You're always selling yourself till the day that you die. So when you're around that person, you have to be courting them as if you weren't married. I can't stress that enough. I can't. I've seen couples and they get old and I'm married 27 years. Thank God. I have grandchildren already. And I tell my wife, we're always selling ourselves to each other. We're selling ourselves. Right? I want you to want me. I want you to feel happy around me. And therefore, if I have a complaint, unless it's something that you could do something about, I'm not going to be sharing all my complaints with you. because it's sort of powerless to hear your spouse complain when you can't do anything about it. And I say this especially to the fairer sex, who that's cathartic. It's cathartic to share. But I want to tell you, if you keep on sharing difficult times, it's not going to be geschmack, right? So pace yourself. Okay, we get the idea. Okay, let's move further with this idea of first light, second light. So far we found out first light is big, bright, beautiful, but it doesn't last because it didn't earn it. Let me give you a few more examples of this. Thanks. Give me a few more examples. Here's an example. When Hashem gave the Luchos, originally the 10 Commandments, they were given with thunder and lightning. The Kol HaShofar, Holech v'Chazaq Ma'od, Moshe Yadaber Elikim Yanena B'Kol. It was brilliant and beautiful. Did the first set of 10 Commandments last? No, because they were first light. It was big and bright, but it didn't last. The second set of 10 Commandments, the second Luchos, when Moshe Rabbeinu brought them down, quiet. He was the only one who knew he was bringing them down, and yet those were the ones that actually lasted. It wasn't the fireworks display that made them last. So here's the question. What's the point of first light if it's not going to last? What's ever the point of first light? Why would Hashem make first light if really the most important thing is second light? So in order to understand this, we have to tell you what Chazal say about a baby in the mother's womb. When the baby is in the mother's stomach, it says in Chazal that a malach teaches the baby all of Torah, Kol HaTorah Kula. And when the baby comes out, the malach comes, says shh, right? Quiet, and he forgets the entire Torah. Now, and that's what they say, people say, that's why the little mark is over here. It's an interesting thing. Is that story, is that Chazal true? Right there? I mean, obviously Chazal say it, but how do we have any proof to that a baby learns all the Torah in the mother's stomach? So, Divrei Chazal, they're true because Chazal say it. But there's a very interesting thing that happened. Many years ago, but not too many, around the 1930s, 1940s, there was a young child who was born, and he did not have a mark over here. He was missing the mark. And when he began to speak, from out of his mouth came Kol HaTorah Kula, all of the Torah. He was a child of a Belzer family, and this little kid began saying things like Rabbi Akiva Eger. Fascinating, little baby. So they brought the baby in front of the Belzer Rebbe, Rabbi Aaron Rokech, the previous Belzer Rebbe, and Rabbi Aaron Rokech said that you think it's a good thing that your child knows all of Torah, but really it's not, because the ayin hara, the evil eye, is going to kill your baby, because everyone's going to be jealous. Everyone breaks their head over one tosus, and here you got a kid who knows the whole thing without trying. The ayin hara, this baby's not going to last. So it's not a good thing. So they said, what should we do? And the Rebbe said, if you want, I can have this baby forget all of his Torah knowledge. And the parents agreed, and they said, if that's what the Rebbe says, the right thing. And according to one version I heard, the Rebbe went like this. According to the other version, he gave a little patch on the face, and the baby forgot all of the Torah. Now, by the way, Rabbi Aaron Rokech was a well-known Baal Mofes. He was well-known in the art of miraculous intervention with the Almighty. And that was the story of this little baby. So I was once doing a trip with my college students, and we were staying at Or Sameach in Monsey. And we were speaking one Friday night, and I was speaking. I had some of the yeshiva guys were there, some of my college students, and I told them this story of the little boy who knew all of the Torah. He knew all of the Torah right away. He was born knowing it, and then the Rebbe came, and then the Rebbe made him forget it. So one of the college students looks at me and they say, come on, Rabbi, do you really believe that such a boy existed? So before I could say anything, one of the yeshiva bachrim said, the story is absolutely true. So the college student says, how do you know? The boy said, he's my uncle. Now, as if that's not enough, I recently told this story in Lakewood, the same story, and a lady came over to me afterwards and said, by the way, he's my cousin. So now I know two people who know the kid, and that boy who's today in his 60s or so is still alive today. He still does not have that mark, and he's just a simple Belzer Chassid, not, as far as I know, not a Talmud Chacham of any note. But, you know, there's a little bit of a history. It's interesting. Okay, question. Why did Hashem make a little child know all of the Torah before he's born and then forget it? And the answer would be because Torah, which is so holy and from so lofty, from on high, it's called black fire on white fire. It's just something very, very special. In order to enter a person, first there has to be some connection to it in the first place. Almost like a space has to be carved within that person to allow the Torah to be poured in. So the reason that the Torah was learned and then forgotten was to carve some space so that our own Torah can then rest. In the same way that if I were to take a block of wood and I were to pour oil in that wood, it would just drip over the sides. But if I were to take a hole, an awl, and make a hole in that block of wood and then pour oil, the oil would fill up that block and it would contain it. So too, and here's the point, first light is there to create a hole for second light. Now we can understand this. Let's go back to love. What would be the point of puppy love? What would be the point of having that courtship when you're head over heels over the person? You know what the point would be? To let you know how much you could love that person. So when sort of the dog days of marriage take their toll, and you've been married a long time, and the romance doesn't feel as sparkly as it did before, you could remember what it felt like when you were first in love, and you could have something to strive towards. The point of first light is to create that hole so that second light could have what to strive for. It's the same thing in an Israel trip. I give them that feeling of Havdalah by the Kaisel in Yerushalayim, not because they're going to feel that a while later, but they said what to shoot for. What should a Havdalah feel like? What should a Shabbat feel like? A little bit, a little taste. The point of first light is there in order to pour in second light. Okay? Now, once we understand this concept of first light, second light, we can go very deep into this concept. Okay. If I'm by the beach, here's how to understand. I'm by the beach, and there's sort of I dig a hole right there by the shore. What's going to happen? If a wave comes, and the wave is going to fill in that hole, and you're not going to end up with a hole anymore, right? You're not going to end up with that hole. It's going to just flatten out, and I'm going to have to re-dig that hole if I want a hole there. In that same way, if I get very inspired, I hear a shiur. Let's say a shiur is a good example of first light, second light. I hear a shiur, I hear a class, I'm very inspired, and then that inspiration goes away. What keeps that inspiration there for me to act on it with second light? What keeps it there? Does it always stay there? Is every inspiration that I ever have, does all that inspiration remain forever? The answer is no. Eventually, inspiration disappears forever. So what keeps first light there so that second light can come and learn from it and build on it? You hear the question? First light should eventually disappear completely. So in order to understand this, I'm going to tell you a halacha. It's a very interesting halacha. When a person goes into the cemetery and they have tzitzit, the law is you're supposed to take the tzitzit and tuck it in your pants. The reason we do that is because of a halacha called lo'eg larash. Lo'eg larash means a poor person is called, a dead person is like a poor person. If I see a poor person, is it nice for me to go around in my fancy Armani suit and my gold-tipped cane, showing my money and my Rolex watch, when this guy can't afford a morsel of bread to eat? Is that nice? What am I doing? What am I doing? I'm making fun of him. I'm saying, look at me and look at you. Look how different we are, okay? In that same way, a dead person can no longer do mitzvot. And because they can't do mitzvot, for me to come in waving my tzitzit around like, hey, look at this. Did you know that every second I wear my tzitzit, I'm getting a separate mitzvah? It's like I'm making fun of him. So the law is, I take my tzitzit and I tuck it in my pants. So this way, he doesn't feel bad. The dead person doesn't feel bad. Now, by the way, I just want to mention something that I think it's interesting to know. The Vilna Gaon, it's a great tzaddik who lived 200 or so years ago. The Vilna Gaon suddenly was greeted by his sister who he hadn't met in many years. Over 10 years, I think it was 13 years, he hadn't seen his sister. And his sister came in, and he was, of course, in the middle of learning. Vilna Gaon was always learning Torah. And Vilna Gaon was an older man then. And his sister came to visit him, and she says, how are you, Rabbi Elio? And she begins to speak with him. And after a little while, he says to his sister, he says, you see what these are? And he holds the white strings of his beard, and he says, you know what this is? These are telegrammen. These are telegrams. These are messages from God that my time is almost up. And therefore, while I would love to speak with you for a long time, I understand that every moment of Torah learning is extremely valuable. And when I die, I'm going to want to do mitzvot, and I'm going to understand the value of mitzvot, and I won't be able to do any of them. When I die, I'm going to want to do anything just to put on tzitzit for 1 more minute. 1 minute of tzitzit? No, can't do it. And if you do it, it's worth nothing. Someone puts tzitzit on a dead person, he doesn't get a mitzvah. So he told his sister, I have to get back to, I'm getting older. Every moment of my life has to be spent learning. So tzitzit, they're the easiest mitzvah in the book. You put them on, you forget about them, and every minute you get a mitzvah. So to go into a cemetery waving your tzitzit is making fun of a dead person who can't get that mitzvah. Question. What? What does that mean? That doesn't make any sense. You know what that sounds like? That sounds like the dead person is right there looking at my tzitzit. Is that what we believe? Do we believe dead people stay in cemeteries? Don't we believe that people who died are in the next world, Olam Haba, Bezat Hashem, Gan Eden? What does that mean, Loig Larash? You're making fun of it. You're laughing at a poor person. The person's not there. The neshama's not there. What do Chazal mean? Hear the question? Answer's fascinating. The answer is yes. The person's neshama is in that next world, but there's a tiny bit of that neshama that actually remains with the body. And the reason that's true is because if there would be no life left at all in the bones, then there can never be tchiyat hamesim. They can never rise up again. And in Kabbalah, that's called Havla de Garmi, the breath of the bones. A little tiny bit of life is left in the bones, and it's that little bit of life, that little tiny bit of life, that feels bad when you dance in with your tzitzis in front of a dead person. Tiny little bit of life.
What if a person's cremated?
That's why we don't cremate. We don't cremate. As a matter of fact, it's a very interesting thing. Of course, person's cremated, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like not against their will, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has his ways. But it's an interesting thing. No, yeah, it's very scary stuff. The Holocaust would be an example. By the way, what is a person rebuilt from? The Havla de Garmi, that breath of life remains in which bone?
It's behind the neck.
What is it called? It's called the luz bone. And that luz bone, what does it get its sustenance from? From Malav Malka. Why? Why Malava Malka? You know the answer is? Because the Malava Malka is the Havla de Garmi of Shabbos. It's the breath of holiness that's left of Shabbos. So the luz bone, which is the breath of life that's left in the bones of the person, gets its sustenance from the breath of Kedusha that's left over from Shabbos, which is called Malava Malka. Does that make sense? Isn't that interesting? Okay, so that concept of Havla de Garmi, there's got to be a little something left. Using that concept, we now understand how first light can remain. First light can remain as long as there's a little bit of first light left in order for second light to hold on to. But if first light is completely gone, if first light is totally extinguished, then the next time you have an experience, it's going to be first light all over again, and you have to start from the beginning. So, for example, if you're in a fight with your spouse, don't cut off all ties if you plan on rekindling that relationship. One of the 10 commandments of marriage that I give, it's on another one of the recordings, is don't use the word divorce. Because when you say, well, if you do this, I'll divorce you, you use that, you're basically taking away that breath of life of the marriage. Scary stuff. That havla, that little something that's left. In the same way, when I have a student who was in Israel and they were inspired, and then they come back to the States and they say, I'm going to do Shabbat, I'm going to do kosher, you know what I say back? You're not going to. But do something. Here, this is called Negelwasser. Do it in the morning. Wash your hands. Do a little something. Because if you do a little something, then when you get your inspiration back, it'll have what to grab onto. If you don't do anything at all, so then you're going to lose your inspiration, and it's going to be starting from scratch all over again. And by the way, I see that in students all the time. There are students that are chronic trip goers. They like to get free trips that the donors have to offer. And there's never growth. You know why there's never growth? Because they never do anything when they come back. All they have is a bunch of nice pictures on their phone. That's all they got to put on Facebook. Do something. Hold on to something. You need that breath of the bones, that havla de garmi. And when you have that havla de garmi, then you're going to be able to hold on to that light, and you'll have a second light. Now that you understand this concept, we're going to be able to make heads and tails of Hanukkah. Because Hanukkah, in its mystical form, is exactly what I just explained. So let's go through this again. You've got first light, big, bright, and beautiful, doesn't last. Second light, not so bright, not so beautiful, much more mature, it does last. Why? Because first light you didn't earn, second light you did earn. However, after first light, you have to hold on to something from the first light. By the way, what are we holding on to? What light are we holding on to that connects to the first light of Bereshis? What light is that? That's the light of Torah. That light of Torah. That's the light. And that's why tzaddikim, it is well known that great tzaddikim have had the ability to see things using a light that we can't connect to. It's a very, very well-known stories with Rabbi Shulei Diskin and even Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who had this broad vision. You know, it's a very famous story that Rabbi Shulei Diskin was passing a tree, an apple tree, and one of the students were there, and they turned to Rabbi Shulei, this great rabbi, the turn of the century. Have you ever heard of Rabbi Shulei Diskin? You want to know how great Rabbi Shulei Diskin was? To understand, Rabbi Shulei Diskin was the Rebbe of the Rogatchover. The Rogatchover, by all counts, had a greater intellect than Einstein. At least by those, there was a student who actually studied by Einstein and the Rogatchover, and they said 2 Einsteins or 10 Einsteins wouldn't equal a Rogatchover. Rogatchover was somebody named Rabbi Yosef Rosen, whose intellect was exceedingly daunting and scary. He was a person who all the other great rabbis of the generation would shake in front of. That was the Rogatchover. And the Rogatchover, his Rebbe was Rabbi Shulei Diskin. He was so great, Rabbi Shulei Diskin, that when he stepped foot onto the soil of Eretz Yisrael, the head rabbis of Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld and Rabbi Shmuel Salant, instantly said, "You are now the rabbi of Israel." He came from Brisk, and he came in, Rabbi Shulei Diskin, and he had that vision of first light. And one of the character traits of first light vision is the ability to see vast numbers in one shot accurately. It's an idea where instead of everything becoming a mush, like if you were to ask me, how many people are in the room now? I would guess, and I'd probably not get it right. I may, if I'm good at estimating, I'll be off by 5. But if you have first light vision, you would be able to see vast numbers in one shot. That was one of the character traits of first light. So somebody heard that about Rabbi Shulei, and Rabbi Shulei was walking near an apple tree, and they said, "Rabbi Shulei, how many apples are there on the tree?" And Rabbi Shulei looks up and says, "Oh, there's 5,642." And he continues walking, and the student almost didn't believe it. So after Rabbi Shulei left, he took down 2 apples, and then when Rabbi Shulei Diskin was coming back from his walk, he said, "How many are there in the tree?" He says, 5,640 minus the 2. Like, instantly he was able to see. And even on his deathbed, he was known to be able to do this. His students once brought him in a questionable garment that it was a question whether it was shatnez or not. And they brought it to him, and he said, "It's not shatnez." And they felt, he was very, very sick at that time. They felt there's no way he could have actually seen the garment for what it was. So they waited a little while. They came back. "We have another question. What about this garment?" And Rabbi Shulei said, "It's the exact same garment you showed me. It has whatever it was, 10,942 threads, and so on." And when they brought the garment out, out of the room, they bought the garment off of the person who owned it, and the students took it apart thread by thread to see if Rabbi Shulei got it right. He got it right exactly how many threads there were in the garment. Rav Moshe Feinstein, by the way, who was a contemporary, he passed away in 86. Rav Moshe Feinstein was able to do something pretty similar. It's a very well-known story that when Rav Moshe Feinstein was a rabbi in a city in Russia, so all of the people in his city, they used to spend days and days buying esrogim. And it bothered Rav Moshe that instead of learning Torah, they're spending their time buying esrogim. So Rav Moshe, and they would go from rabbi to rabbi. Is it kosher? Is it mahadran? Is it kosher? Is it mahadran? So finally Rav Moshe said, "Listen, don't go around from person to person. You're wasting their time. You're wasting yours. I'll tell you what. I will look at all of your esrogim, the whole city's esrogim. You bring it to me one day. I'll look at them, and I'll tell you kosher or not. And this way you won't have to waste your time. You'll be able to go back to learning." And so it was decided. And the day came, and the line of people waiting to show Rav Moshe their esrogim was literally as far as the eye could see. All the people in the town came with their esrog in their box. And Rav Moshe was standing by a stender, and as they brought in the esrogim, he went like this, spun kosher, kosher, not kosher, kosher, not kosher. And he didn't even look up at the person. They were just handed to him, kosher, kosher. And he was going through the line very quickly. Now there was this one younger man who spent a long time actually looking for a beautiful esrog. And when Rav Moshe took it, and within a millisecond, it's kosher, and passed it on, he was like, "He didn't really look. He probably didn't really look." Well, he went back in line. You might want to Rav Moshe to look at it a second time. It came time, it was his turn again, and Rav Moshe took it, saw it already. Saw it already. And believe me, a lot of esrogim look very similar. I know, when I shop for esrogim, if they're not marked, I'll pick up the same esrog 3 times, not realizing I've looked at it already, right? Saw it already. right? This tremendous vision that tzaddikim have, right? That's the Havla de Garmi, that a little bit of extra vision. Okay. How does that all tie into Hanukkah? Okay, so in order to understand this, got to look in Parshas Baloischa, and there the Nesiim each brought a beautiful gift, each one a different day, and then Aaron HaKohen said, what about me? What about me? Where's my, I want to give a gift also. So Hashem said, no, Shalcha Gedola Mishalem. What's yours, what I'm going to give you to do is greater than them. Because I'm going to have you light the menorah. Right? You are going to light the menorah. Yours is greater than theirs. Comes along the Ramban. The Ramban says, because this is going to be a mitzvah that will last forever through the menorah of Hanukkah. It's a very strange thing. Like, the menorah of Hanukkah has how many lights? 8. How many lights did the actual menorah in the Beis HaMikdash have? 7, right? 7. We have 8 in the Shamas. There were 7 actual layers. So it wasn't even the same menorah. So what is the Ramban saying? Yours is greater than theirs because you're going to have the light of the menorah. The answer is like this. Hashem says, Aaron, they got a dazzling gift. They brought a dazzling gift. It's beautiful with a lot of pomp and circumstance. But once their gift is over, I'm never going to need a gift from the Nesiim again. The Mishkan is up, it's running, we're not going to need it from them again. But you're going to light a light. And not only are you going to light a light, but every day it's going to be beautiful, every day it's going to be unique. But not only will it be unique, I'm going to tell you something so beautiful. He says that menorah that we light during Hanukkah, that menorah is going to be connected to your light. You know why? Because the story of Hanukkah has a Havla de Garmi. Yes, you have a first light, and that's lighting the menorah. And yes, there's going to be a second light, and that second light is going to be the light of the menorah on Hanukkah. But they're going to be connected through a little breath of the bones, a little Havla de Garmi. And what was that Havla de Garmi? That was the Pach Shemen. That was the tiny little bit of oil that was found. And the tiny little bit of oil, that's something that was left when it looks like all hope was lost, when the Greeks came and they brought Avodah Zarah in the Beis HaMikdash and they said, we don't want you anymore, we don't need you, everything is profane, you'll become Hellenists, you'll become Greeks. There was a little bit of oil. That Pach Shemen is the Havla de Garmi. That little bit of oil in the jug was able to rekindle the light, not just in the Beis HaMikdash, but from that Pach Shemen, we got second light, and that second light was able to last for all of eternity. Let's take this home. Let's figure out what this has to do with us. We all go to Shirim and we get inspired. We go to a Rosh Hashanah, a Yom Kippur, and we get inspired. We see somebody who passes away tragically, and we're inspired to do something with our lives. We may even come back from here inspired. But we all know that that inspiration will not last. It's going to disappear. It's how Hashem made it. You know why? Because the inspiration from today, it's wonderful that you came, but you didn't do anything yet. You came. But that's not called doing. Doing means you come away from here and you say, something that I was inspired about in the past, that I knew I should take action about, whether it was learning Pirkei Avot, giving more tzedakah, learning Shmiras HaLashon, being nicer to my spouse, taking care of the needy, whatever it is, I know I should have done it, I know I had best of intentions, but I never did anything about it. And therefore, if the fire is a little bit left, there's a little bit of fire. Thank you so much. Thank you. If there's a little bit of fire left inside of me, then that little bit of fire is going to rekindle, and we're going to have a second light. And that's what first light, second light is all about. So you go to a shir, take something right away and do something with it. Write some, make a hachlata, make a kabbalah. Do something, don't do nothing. Because if you do nothing, then you're going to have first light again and again and again and again. And I'll finish with this story. Here's the story. There was I gave a talk in Staten Island last week. It was called the College of Staten Island. And there was a fellow there by the name of Paul. And Paul, he was listening. He wasn't a college student. He was an older fellow. He was one of the donors, actually. And I was speaking about connecting the dots, figuring out how A leads to B leads to C, and how if we have emunah, we'll be able to connect the dots. And he calls me the next morning, and he says, something amazing happened. I have to share this with you. I can't even believe it. I said, what is it? He said, you know, right after you spoke, while you spoke, my phone was ringing, and I didn't pick up because you were speaking. After you spoke, I got a phone call from the gabbai of Nate Siegel. Nate Siegel is a rabbi in Staten Island, one of the heads of Torah Masorah. And he said, I got a phone call from Chaim, who was the gabbai of Nate Siegel. And Chaim says, I have a question for you. He asks Paul. He says, do you remember about 40 years ago, Nate called you? And Nate said that there's a young lady in Eretz Yisrael, a young girl, and she's very sick. She has cancer, lo yaleinu, and she needs a procedure, a very expensive procedure. And the family can't afford it. And so, can you please help this little girl with the procedure? And 40 years ago, Paul thought about it, and he said to himself, you know, I'm gonna help out. I'm gonna help this young lady. I don't know who she is, but I'm inspired. I have this first light inspiration. I'm gonna do something about it. So he said, I took out my checkbook, and I wrote a check for the entire procedure for this young girl who had cancer. The next morning, I called Nate Siegel, and I said, I wrote a check out for the entire procedure. You don't have to fundraise anymore. I wrote a check out for the whole thing. And Nate says back to me, I'm sorry to tell you, the little girl passed away last night. So I was there, I was very sad. I really wanted to do that mitzvah. An hour later, I get a phone call from a random person in Yerushalayim, and the man says, look, I have a son, and he needs a certain procedure. He's very, very sick. And someone told me you're about tzedakah. I don't know, maybe you could help me. So Paul said, normally I would not give such a big sum like I was going to give to this young girl. But I thought, you know, that was my moment of inspiration. That was my first light. Now it's tough for me. The inspiration's gone, I'm feeling sad. But I'm going to force myself, I'm going to push myself, and I'm going to take that same check I was going to give the girl, I'm going to give that check right to this random stranger, that random guy. And I took that huge check, and I gave it to the guy. And Chaim, this gabbai of Nate Siegel, said, do you remember that story 40 years ago? Paul said, yeah, I remember. I gave it to this guy in Israel. So Chaim, who is the gabbai, Chaim actually is taking care of Nate Siegel. Nate Siegel's very, very sick right now, and he's taking care of him. So Chaim said, I want to tell you something that you may find interesting, he says to Paul. He says, Paul, you know, we've known each other for years. He said, last night, my son got married. And I was so happy, it was such a simcha. And at the wedding, my father, the chassan's grandfather, comes over to me and he says, you know, you remember Chaim, remember I told you when you were a little boy, you were very sick? Well, you know, there was a person, a random American, I don't know who he is, but that random American, he wrote out a check for you. And today you are alive only because of this random stranger. And I copied that check, and I've never shown you that check, but I want to show it to you. Maybe you could track down this American who gave the check to save your life. And he hands me the check, and Chaim says, I look at the check, and there's your name on it. Paul, you saved my life 40 years ago. You were the mysterious benefactor. And today, I'm taking care of Nate because I'm alive, and you only wrote out the check to this little girl because your Rabbi Nate said, write out the check, this is what you need. So the first light was writing to this little girl, and the second light, which is more difficult, maybe the inspiration was gone, but that second light saved Nate Siegel's life, and it saved Chaim's life. So he called me and he said, we have to connect those dots. So here we are in Hanukkah, and we have a chance to have not just first light, but second light, and third light, and fourth light, all the way till eighth light, right? So if you're very excited by Hanukkah, something happens first night of Hanukkah, everyone's wishing each other happy Hanukkah, and Hanukkah Sameach, and everyone's all jolly and happy, and then comes the fifth night already, and we're so, fifth night of Hanukkah, okay, got to get home. Oh no, we didn't clean up. You're supposed to clean up for the day before, and the oil's all over, and the table's a mess, and you got to clean up the wicks, and all the glamour seems to be gone. So I beg of you to find a way to keep that first light through second light by doing something on Hanukkah to help somebody, whether it's tzedakah or a mitzvah or a chesed. Do what you need to do, and Be'ez Hashem, with God's help, thank you so much, with God's help, we will each be able to hold on to the light of Hanukkah throughout the coming year. Thank you very much.